Good morning. I'm Stephen Bassett, Executive Director of the Paradigm Research Group. We have some announcements to make. But before we do that, I want to introduce some of the people that are on the panel. All of these individuals were part of the fourth X-Conference 2008, that was just held at the Hilton Gaithersburg Hotel, April 18 through 20. Starting on this end is Joseph Buckman from Utah. This is Dr. C.B. Scott Jones. This is Victor Vinciani from Canada. This is Angela Joyner from Stephenville, Texas. Rob Simone, Los Angeles. Richard Dolan from Rochester, New York. And Grant Cameron from the esteemed province of Manitoba. All right? Okay. I'm going to go through these announcements, I think. Well, I'm going to go through some initial announcements. At any time that a reporter wants to ask a question, go ahead. If I don't get a question right away, then we'll take some at the end, and we'll be done. We will be done by 11 o'clock. But I want to get the most important announcement out of the way first. All right. Paradigm Research Group makes the following announcements regarding matters from and related to X-Conference 2008 at the Gaithersburg Hilton. First regards Senator Hillary Clinton. Right? As presented by Canadian researcher Grant Cameron at the X-Conference, presidential candidate Clinton has been aware of the extraterrestrial presence issue at least since 1993, when her husband's administration was approached by Laurance S. Rockefeller regarding the release of all UFO documents and other related information in government files, and making a commitment to tell the public the full facts regarding an extraterrestrial presence engaging the human race. This effort has come to be called the Rockefeller Initiative, and it lasted for 3 years. Confirmation of this effort was obtained by Cameron by a Freedom of Information Act filings for material from the files of the Office of Science and Technology Policy, which at that time was run by Dr. John Gibbons. One of these documents is attached. An additional 162 key-related documents can be viewed at a website. It's on the press release. And a history of the RI can be viewed at Mr. Cameron's website, which is presidentialufo.com. Now, I'm going to indulge myself a little bit and read this one document, which just to make sure that it doesn't get mixed in the milieu. All right? This is one of the 900 pages of documents that were obtained by Mr. Cameron, and of course 163, the key ones are up on the website, as I said. This document is dated February the 5th, 1996. This is just 3 years into the Rockefeller Initiative. The letter is from Laurance Rockefeller to Dr. John Gibbons, Jack, of the Office of Science and Technology Policy. And of course we have the cover letter that goes with it. No problem. Its authenticity, I think, is without question. This is the letter. Dear Jack, we appreciate your taking the time last week for our very productive telephone call. As always, your knowledge of the scientific and federal government scene is particularly useful to those of us trying to be helpful as citizens. As soon as the best evidence report, the report written by Don Berliner and coordinated by Marie Galbraith, which we have referred to as the Bootsy Report, because Marie was referred to as the Bootsy Galbraith, is published, we shall send you a copy. This report is an unusual combined effort of the 3 major UFO organizations. We believe that it is quite factual and avoids sensationalism. We, of course, would be very much interested in your reaction. As you suggested, we will ask those who worked on the report to put forward 2 or 3 names who might be candidates for a pilot project to assess the usefulness of an expanded amnesty program we have urged. The amnesty program he's referring to is a program under presidential directive that would give amnesty to any individual who had worked on UFO ET-related matters with any service or agency of the government, so that if they wish to come forward and discuss that, even though there might be superiors involved, they would have complete amnesty and in no way would be in risk of prosecution. We would hope there could be a public-private review of this effort coordinated by your office. Your willingness to approach the Air Force, the Central Intelligence Agency, and NASA on this project is extremely important. We will await the results of this effort in order to add any significant findings to our proposed letter to the President. We will, of course, take into account the comments you made on the draft. It well may be that it will be timely to put this before the President late this year in order that it might receive attention in the second term. You indicated that you will keep the First Lady's office informed, and we shall as well. Jack, we know you have a great many day-to-day and short-term urgent problems which demand your limited time, so we are particularly grateful for the very responsive attention you are paying to our initiative. Sincerely, Laurance S. Rockefeller. Now, recent developments involve more documents that are going to be obtained from the Clinton Library. Lead researcher Grant Cameron will come up and make some comments on that, and he may have a couple of the comments on the basic announcement. Grant?
Okay, there's actually a second document which I guess wasn't distributed, which people can get from me, or we can email it to them. This is a document from the same year. Let me get it up here. This is a letter from Henry Diamond, who was Laurance Rockefeller's lawyer, and this is Jack Gibbons, the President's Science Advisor, dated November the 1st, 1995, and I'll just read the first paragraph. It says, "Dear Jack, attached are a draft letter to the President which Laurance has been discussing with Mrs. Clinton and her staff, and a draft report of the best available evidence about UFOs." Now, attached to that document was the draft letter, and the draft letter is titled "Lifting Secrecy on Information about Extraterrestrial Intelligence as Part of the Clinton Classification Review." So basically, what had happened is Laurance Rockefeller had this letter that he was going to send to the President. He had various people helping him to edit the letter, and this document shows that Hillary Clinton was one of the people that helped him edit a letter to the President on ET disclosure. As to the recent developments, I have filed, based upon the 1,000 pages I got from the President's Science Advisor's office, I took all the names and combined with some researchers, have filed about 100 Free Information Act requests with the Clinton Library, and I think about 600 pages now, which includes 450 pages on Area 51, which the Air Force has always denied exists, and a number of other minor files. The major files, 1,500 pages on UFOs, have not been released yet. There are some videos and some interesting footage that apparently has been processed. This has created a bit of a stir now because Judicial Watch has filed a lawsuit against the National Archives stating that the release of the UFO files is a waste of the time from the Clinton Library, and they would rather have the Hillary Clinton files. The bottom line of that is I filed first, and the way it works at the National Archives is first come, first served. I have approximately 30,000 pages of material under review at the Clinton Library.
Thank you, Grant. Okay, excellent. Okay, very good. Now I'm going to move to the next one here, and that is regarding developments in Canada. And the gentleman that will speak to that is Victor Vigiani of Exopolitics Toronto. Victor, come to you, please.
Thank you, Stephen. I have a prepared statement to make. I'll read it, but I'd like to preface it by saying that the release it will be available on the website at Exopolitics Toronto later on today. This initiative that I'm going to be announcing is extremely significant. It is a civil society initiative to implement the 1978 UN General Assembly decision on extraterrestrial life and unidentified flying objects. 4 non-governmental organizations have launched a joint initiative to urge the implementation of a historic United Nations General Assembly decision concerning extraterrestrial life and UFOs. This was adopted on December 18th, 1978. This year, 2008, marks the 30th anniversary of the UN General Assembly decision 33/426 that invited, and I quote, member states to take appropriate steps to coordinate on a national level scientific research and investigation into extraterrestrial life, including unidentified flying objects. The decision further invited member states to, and I quote again, inform the Secretary General of the observations, research, and evaluation of these activities. The 4 NGOs have sent letters to the individual leaders of the governments of France, the United Kingdom, Mexico, and Brazil, requesting each to forward to the UN Secretary General details of the documents concerning UFOs each country has publicly released in the last several years. A letter will be sent to the UN Secretary General Ban, reminding him of the upcoming 30th anniversary of the General Assembly, Decision 33/426, and requesting with him a meeting to discuss the implication and implementation of this decision, and informing him of the recent observations, research, and evaluation concerning extraterrestrial life and unidentified flying objects. The main goal of the joint NGO initiative is to have the UN Secretary General take steps to implement General Assembly Decision 33/426. That is the end of the actual press release, and I do want to do something very important at this time, is to introduce to you a very significant individual who is among us today, who is supporting this initiative. And this individual is Ambassador John MacDonald. He is the leader of the Institute for Multi-Track Diplomacy here in the Washington, Virginia area. And in addition to a distinguished career as a lawyer, his work at the State Department and in the International Labor Organization met with great success. And he was twice appointed ambassador by President Jimmy Carter to represent the United States at various UN conferences throughout the world. And we will be available for any questions that you may have, both myself and the ambassador. Thank you.
Appreciate that, Victor. All right, the next announcement is regarding a disclosure and peace development and other issues. This will be presented to you by Dr. C.B. Scott Jones, a gentleman who has an extensive career in military and intelligence operations and service of the national security of the United States.
I have a short press release which is available, but basically my specific interest at this time is to acknowledge again John MacDonald and the work he is doing in peace. I run a small nonprofit organization that has dedicated itself to come up with strategies to engage the future leaders of the world during their college and university days. And that is rather straightforward conflict resolution and peace studies programs. But it has been easy for me to see that it is important to link those basic and I think unarguable needs to a broader view of what peace and stability really will mean. Anticipating that either by accident or by design, and I hope careful design and strategy, disclosure will be made about the simple reality that we are a small part of a much larger community of civilizations in the universe. And so I have linked my interest in both of these fields and will be introducing this as I travel around the world to universities. It is my observation that there is an unmet critical need for the academic community of the world to start to look seriously at the consequences of disclosure. If you think about what it will mean to all sectors of society, political, I can't think of any, of the potential for a really undescribable glory or an undescribable chaos unless disclosure is done prudently and carefully. So I have in the press release will discuss what I call Plan C. Plan A was the strategy that I designed for Laurance Rockefeller to meet with Jack Gibbons. Plan B was something that spontaneously came up during the first meeting with Jack. was Mr. Rockefeller's willingness to take out a full-page ad in every national newspaper to encourage the citizens of the country to contact the White House and the Congress about really what does the government have to share with the American public. I won't give you the background of this. It got our first meeting off to a shaky start, but it then normalized, and indeed we did get cooperation from Jack. So Plan C is an extension of that. There are three functions of Plan C. First of all, is to gather a large database, unemotional, very practical, which is abundantly available, of the evidence that contact has been going on, specifically in the early or in the late period of the last 60 years, but dating back to the dawn of civilization, and to urge academe and independent think tanks to take the responsibility of looking at what is the likely outcome in their country and culture of the consequences of irrefutable evidence that contact has been made and sustained. And then to look further out, in at least 1 year out after disclosure has been made, what does that mean and what is happening in that culture? This is the sort of preparation that I think is necessary. Plan C is not designed for direct government or indeed UN participation. We want to put this into the hands of the public, of the people of the world, and give them a voice. We think this is very important. And of course that voice is not heard because of the current policies of all the countries of the world, but principally the United States, to keep this knowledge very secret. I will post this, the details of Plan C on the website. At the X conference, this was the first delivery of it. And it is a plan in development. And we sincerely hope that the press will pick this up, talk about it in a responsible way, and so we can move this forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. The next announcement is by Dr. Joseph Buckman, the 1st District, Congressional District of Utah.
I'm running as the Libertarian candidate for the 1st District of Utah. I'm here to serve as a representative of that district in Washington, D.C. For those of you who aren't familiar with the Libertarian Party, it is grounded on the principle, rather obvious and simple principle, that no human being has the right to initiate force against any other human being for any reason whatsoever, no matter how good it might seem at the time. I see a real intersection between that political philosophy and exopolitics. I doubt very much there are any Democrats or Republicans out there. But I'm very much of the opinion and belief and certainty that any advanced civilization that has evolved to become technologically advanced enough to be curious about us would be living in that simple paradigm of not initiating force against others. And that's my passion around running. You'll find in my press release a call on Congress to do two things. First, to pass legislation that would remove any secrecy oaths or contractual arrangements around secrecy among military or military contractors who've had experience with extraterrestrial issues. And many of us in this room have dear friends, perhaps people we've known and trusted for years, who are unable to talk to us about these issues. We have positions in NASA and the Pentagon, as do I. I'm convinced they're men of honor, men of integrity, and that once Congress would pass such legislation, they would be free to talk about an issue that they would dearly love to share with their families, their wives, and others. And then secondly, I'm calling on the United States Congress to hold open hearings, to invite these people relieved of these security oaths to testify openly. And thirdly, calling on Congress to reestablish its constitutional authority over the spending of this government, over the budgets, many of which that are hidden in black areas that are difficult to find. And that is not my only reason for running, not my only political platform. I would call on us to do other things consistent with the Libertarian Party, but you can read more about that on my website. But this is a core issue, one about which I feel passionately. And Steve, I'd like to thank you for giving me this opportunity.
You're welcome. An important point needs to be made here. Those of you familiar with the political process know that with respect to the two major parties, the Democrat and Republican Party, you can have 1,000, 10,000 candidates running for Congress. They can apply, it costs $50. Of course, the primary is designed to weed them out, and two, the Democrat and Republican get on the ballot. Or you can get on the ballot as an independent or from one of the third parties. Right? However, that's not so easy. You have to get many, many signatures. It takes a lot of time. So being a candidate is one thing. Getting on the November ballot is another. The reason that Joseph is here is because he is on the ballot in November for the 1st District of Utah. He is the third person in the history of American political campaigns, going back to 1700s, to be on a ballot discussing this issue, federal campaigns now, openly and direct. The first two were President Jimmy Carter in 1976 and myself in the 8th District of Maryland in 2002. So we're making some progress, and I am very pleased that Joseph is doing that. All right, let's see. I want to make sure that I'm getting these in the proper order. All righty. I have an announcement I'm making on behalf of Dr. Lynn Katai. Today, Vanguard Cinema announces that they are releasing, all right, the upgraded, re-edited version of her important documentary, The Phoenix Lights. Dr. Lynn Katai is an internationally recognized health educator and medical doctor that's been based in Phoenix. She had had a history of making documentary films regarding medical issues, and she happened to be on that fateful night in 1997, a first-hand witness to the events of that evening in which a massive craft, earlier in the evening, passed over most of the state of Arizona and was seen by thousands of people, including the governor of Arizona, Bud Symington, who has recently come forward to acknowledge that in a number of ways, including appearing on Larry King, CNN, and moderating a significant press conference November the 12th here, where a number of international governmental, people who have been in service in their country, mostly pilots, had come in to give their testimony with respect to extraordinary things that they have seen. He moderated that panel. There were another event later that night in which lights were over the city for a very long time. Most Americans don't know there were two events. The second event is also very significant, but the first event was extraordinarily significant. This documentary, as Edgar Mitchell, Dr. Edgar Mitchell, the Apollo astronaut and the sixth man to walk on the moon, he said, a compelling and thoroughly documented account of the most bizarre and widely observed UFO event in modern times. We have a press release on that, which includes a copy of the newly released Phoenix Lights documentary, and we bring that to your attention. All right, now, the next announcement is, just make sure that I'm in the proper order here. Do this right. Yes, the next announcement regards PRG again. Today, PRG announces the launching of the Exopolitics World Network. We are essentially announcing a network of websites which will chronicle exopolitical developments within their respective countries and network with other similar sites worldwide. 10 countries are on board, with 2 pending, and PRG is seeking webmasters in 20 other countries to bring their sites online to create essentially a complex of sites. Exopolitics United Kingdom.uk, Exopolitics United States.us, Exopolitics Germany.de, Exopolitics Spain.es, and so forth. And these sites will then network together, and we expect them to then be extremely prominent on the web and draw attention to this issue. Now, 2 individuals who have stepped forward in Europe have done a fantastic job really taking the bull by the horns, not only in terms of the website, but in terms of media and other exposure to this issue, have come from Europe to attend the X conference. And I'm going to bring them up to say a few words about the development of their sites. We have from Denmark, Frederick Udall, and from Germany, Robert Fleischer.
My name is Frederik Uldal. I come from Denmark. I live in Copenhagen. I have recently established the website exopolitics.dk. And a lot of material I'm presenting is what we have here, lots of witness testimonies and material and information about new energy technologies. What I also have done recently is to deliver the documentary Out of the Blue that James Fox made to the members of the Danish Parliament, and this is the most recent activism that I have done. And I have this fairly new initiative, so I haven't I haven't gone forward with any more at the moment, but I expect more activism to come.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Robert?
Good morning. My name is Robert Fleischer. I live in Leipzig, Berlin. I founded the German Exopolitics Initiative in June of last year because I thought it is an important issue that we are being visited by intelligent beings. And I think this truth should not be withheld by the public. So far, our website has had more than 200,000 visitors. There is a huge interest in the German public. Also, mainstream media is approaching us, and we expect this interest to grow even more. I think we should all work together. There's a lot of work to do. The mass media is ignoring this topic so far, and we will do a common effort in Europe. We will work closely together. We will build up an infrastructure of websites. We will exchange information. We will present it in a professional manner, and we expect disclosure to happen soon, and we will do our share to do it happen. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, the next announcement is by one of the most important researchers in this field. Actually, he's an historian. He wrote a seminal book, UFOs in the National Security State, Volume 1, which has become a platform on which people can educate themselves to what I consider exopolitical aspects of this thing going back to 1947. He is working on another book. He wants to talk about that. I want to bring forward Richard Dolan.
Thank you, Steve. Not a very long announcement. I just wanted to mention that the next book will be done this year. Several years ago, I left the world of academia to write UFOs in the National Security State because it was not the kind of a book that a professor could write and get very far in the field. That book, which covers the years 1941 to 1973, is about 500 pages, and it's an analysis and a narrative of the national security dimensions of the UFO phenomenon. I'm happy to say that the second volume of this study will be done before the year is out. It will be the second of a 3-volume effort. So this next book will cover the years 1973 to 1991, very, very important 2 decades in the history of this. It will cover in great detail the key military encounters of the United States and many other nations during that period with unidentified objects, violations of airspace throughout that period, as well as an analysis of such policy as we can weave together from the documents at hand. That'll be 500 pages. The third volume, for which the research is finished, needs to be written, and that'll be another 500 pages. It will cover 1991 to the present day. So, in fact, it is my intention and my hope that the complete 3-volume collection will be about 1,500 pages and will serve as a permanent and reliable resource for researchers and activists alike who are interested in delving into this matter in a reliable way. Thank you.
Our next announcement is by a gentleman who's been researching a number of aspects of this field, including the media involvement with the issue going back into the beginning of the century, beginning of the last century. Let me bring forward now Rob Simone.
We're here today at the National Press Club to talk about the extraterrestrial issue. in the pursuit of our government finally acknowledging it in a formal way. As someone who has traveled around the world and explored this from the earliest indications of ancient civilizations to global news agencies today, it is clear to me that there is a presence going on that to this day still remains unacknowledged by our government. It prompted me to put together a book called UFOs in the Headlines, which is out just this year. And it is a compilation of news articles, newspapers from around the world, starting in 1950 up to the present day. Newspaper articles from France, from Britain, from America, the New York Times, the Washington Post, even Asia, Turkey, all chronicle this ongoing interaction between another intelligence, one that has interwoven itself with the military-industrial complex. But this is a compendium and a reference source to demonstrate the history of UFOs from a journalistic perspective.
All righty. The next announcement is regarding a PRG matter, namely at the awards banquet at the 2008 Exopolitics Expo, Conference 2008. The following individuals received awards. This is our fourth year, so this is the fourth set of award winners. The awards were as follows. The award for intellectual courage went to the late Dr. John E. Mack, Harvard University Center for Psychology and Social Change, and PEER, the Program for Extraordinary Experience Research. The award for political courage went to the Honorable Paul Hellyer, a legendary politician in Canada. The award for courage in journalism went to George Norrie, the host of the #1 late night talk show in America, Coast to Coast AM, which for the last 17 years has been the principal major outlet for the kinds of key information that you're receiving today, along with some other wild and crazy stuff. But nevertheless, its vast audience is being informed, I fear, not as much better than the audience that watches the nightly news. The Lifetime Achievement Award posthumously went to Laurance S. Rockefeller, who we referred to earlier. And the Lifetime Achievement Award Living went to Apollo astronaut Dr. Edgar Mitchell. And the Disclosure Award went to the most important living witness to Roswell events of July of 1947, Dr. Jesse Marcel Jr. All right? Now, before we, there's one other thing I want to do. Earlier, Freddy Goodall referred to the fact that the mass media was not covering this. Well, let me clarify that for you. In fact, as my website indicates in its archive, tens of thousands of articles have been written on this issue. I have, I think, 1,900 now archived on my website since the 40s. So, obviously it has covered it, but so what's the problem? The problem is that the coverage at the local level, the regional level, where your basic reporters go out and take the news, get the reports, write it up, has been perfectly fine. And what they have covered and written up should have every high-end journalist salivating and looking around for Pulitzer Prizes. But when you get up to the papers of record and the networks of record, coverage evaporates. And, or is, how would you say, highly problematic. This goes back since the beginning. So there is a gap, a major gap, and the American people need to find out why there is such a gap. As it happens, we have here today one of those local reporters who stepped up and did what is appropriate, covered a significant story related to this issue, and covered it with distinction, writing many, many articles on that. So that's why I invited her to come to speak to our conference. And what I'd like now is for her to step forward for a minute and introduce herself to the Washington Press Corps, just in case they need some tips on how to write this up well. Please welcome Angela Joyner of Stephenville, Texas, where we had a major sighting in January of this year, 60 miles from the Crawford Ranch.
Hi, it's a thrill for me to be here. My message would be primarily for the journalists. I would encourage you to really take a hard look at these issues and report them as straight news, no tongue-in-cheek, because I think that's what it deserves. That's how I wrote the stories from Stephenville, and it seemed to get a lot of attention, and it seems to get a good message out there that we need to take this subject seriously. Thank you.
All right, we have a little bit of time left, maybe a little bit more, depending upon whether the room has been booked for the afternoon session. So in our remaining time, we will take questions from anyone at the room at this point. Does someone have a question? All right. Yes.
I have one question.
Speak as loud as you comfortably
I'm
can.
not particularly familiar with all your issues, but whenever I try to go on a website, the first thing which comes up is awfully black and with a terrible green color, and it scares me. And I wonder whether there's a reason for it. I do not say that everyone does it, but a lot of the websites are ominous somehow, and then I better get off again. So I wonder whether you can give me a reason for it.
I'm reminded of Marshall McLuhan's great book and his great line that put him forever in history. The medium is the message. You know, it's funny. You know where that comes from? Primarily, it comes from the X-Files, the single most popular show in history on the subject, right? And if you remember that show, they saved a fortune producing that show because they never turned the lights on, and they were always walking around these little pen lights. You know, they'd go to lunch, right? And it would be in the dark, and they have the pen light looking for the salad and everything. But you know, and it is kind of interesting, and I can see why someone would say, "Why is it this way?" Well, I'll tell you why it's this way. Because essentially this issue is an issue because the government has made decisions, I think, they felt in the interest of national security, to go black, to put so much in the dark, in the basement, where Mulder and Scully would have to go with their little pen lights to see what is going on. They made it mysterious and secret. And this kind of reflects that back to the government. So when the thing is brought out in the light of day, I predict that a lot of the black in those websites will start to go away. Other questions, please? Yes, sir.
What can the community do to form like a grassroots efforts to press the presidential candidates to open up a little bit about this topic?
Very easy. And the candidates listen very carefully, or very, very, very tuned to any input that comes in, generally, particularly when they're running. Any letters, particularly letters, handwritten, that go to a candidate's headquarters saying, "Why aren't you talking about this issue?" Or Dennis Kucinich, "Why did you tap dance so much when Tim Russert asked you that serious question? Why didn't you just answer it straight?" Or Bill Richardson, "Why didn't you answer Chris Matthews straight?" And then the media, send the media and say, "Look, people are not covering this issue. Why don't you cover it? This happened, that happened." Perfect example. Dana Milbank, who is the lead political columnist for the Washington Post, he's a big shot. He came and covered the my ex-conference press conference last year, and he wrote a full second page of the Washington Post. He covered it well. Now he put his tongue in his cheek, which they sort of have to do, but the information was there, and I was damn glad to have it. It was wonderful. All right. Then on November the 12th, just a couple months later, is when the Coalition of Freedom of Information and James Fox put together a significant press conference here where they brought in pilots and generals and members of foreign militaries to speak to this issue and present their testimony. Fi Symington moderated that. And it was very powerful, and you can find it on the website, the November 12th press conference, Coalition of Freedom of Information, freedomofinfo.org. And Dan Milbank was there, and he saw it all. Testimonies from pilots and high-level officials in a number of governments clearly indicating that there was an extraterrestrial presence. He didn't write that up. He didn't write that at all, you see. So we're here, and I'm going to continue to come back here, where there's a room dedicated upstairs to my good friend Sarah McClendon, and do this, and do this, and do this, until the political media in this country take a long read of their professional ethics and their role and what they're supposed to do, and take this thing appropriately. Next question, please. We okay? You sure? Nobody wants to ask a little bit more about Hillary Clinton? Oh, sorry, I didn't see you.
All right. My question's for Mr. Kamen. What type of documents are you trying to get disclosed? What is their goal? What are they like?
Yeah, absolutely, please.
What I did with my Freedom of Information Act requests at the Clinton Library is to follow the original documents. Correspondence between Laurance Rockefeller and Hillary Clinton, correspondence between the President and Laurance Rockefeller, to get more detail, because the documents I got were out of the Office of Science and Technology Policy, which is the President's Science Advisor. But there's a bunch of other areas. For example, there's 1,500 pages just on UFOs that are in another area. There's John Podesta's 50th birthday, which John Podesta was a big X-Files fan. So documents on John Podesta and the X-Files, his interest in the X-Files, the Area 51 files, because John Podesta had stated he phoned Area 51. This is the Clintons were involved in a lawsuit there. And so it just going through all these various names in the document, asking for correspondence with the President, the role of Billy Graham. Billy Graham was at one point indirectly involved in the Rockefeller Initiative, so I asked for all the correspondence with Billy Graham. Steven Spielberg and his wife were very close friends with Bill and Hillary Clinton, so I asked for all the correspondence between the Spielbergs and just to see what comes up. The Clintons talked on 26 occasions about various UFOs, aliens, this sort of stuff. So I pulled the speeches as to who put it in the speech. Was it Bill and Hillary that put it in the speech? Was it a speechwriter? I have 14 different events concerning Bill and Hillary Clinton's involvement and interest in the UFO phenomena, and I go through all those. For example, the Secretary of, when Bill Clinton first got in, his Secretary of Defense asked Melvin Laird, who was the former Secretary of Defense under Richard Nixon, for a UFO briefing. So of course then you have to ask for all the documents out of the Secretary of Defense, Les Aspin's office, related to conversations with Marvin Laird. There's a whole series. And as we go along, people give me other things that we file. The problem with it is it takes, at the Reagan Library, it takes 5 years to get something processed. The list is that long. Now, the situation with these is I filed very early, so a lot of the requests are about to come. For example, there's a birthday party, John Podesta's 50th birthday party, where apparently Bill and Hillary Clinton dressed up like the X-Files characters. That video is now in Bruce Lindsay's possession, the Clintons' possession, as to whether they're going to release it, but it has been processed by the library. And I'm very close to the front of the queues. One of the other things I was looking for is Webster Hubble. Bill Clinton asked Webster Hubble, according to Webster Hubble's 1997 book, Friends in High Places, that he was asked by Bill Clinton to go out and look at 2 conspiracy things, UFOs and the death of JFK. So I filed on both those issues. I tried to get the UFO files, but I also wondered why Bill was questioning the JFK assassination. So I filed for all documents in the Clinton Library on the JFK assassination. There are 3,500 pages. Now those will be released, I would say, shortly. Okay?
It's very significant to note, one of the key things that he's looking for are documents from the Executive Office which relate to and further confirm the Rockefeller Initiative, which has been fully confirmed. Right? Now that's significant. Here's why. The reason that Grant was able to get the 900 pages from the Office of Science and Technology Policy, which is an executive office, is that that office, and there's a few others like it, it was not part of the Presidential Records Act, meaning if you wanted something from the Clinton White House and many other parts of the executive, you can't get them, right, until they are then released into the library and they come out through the Records Act much, much later. And this is for reasons you can imagine. But the OSTP was not included. For reasons I don't know. Nevertheless, because it wasn't included, it had to obey the FOIA law and start releasing the documents. It's interesting, and of course that has led to a very significant situation, which I'll point out in a second. It's interesting to note that one of the executive orders that President Bush signed a year or two into his administration was a presidential directive taking the OSTP and bringing it in and under the Presidential Records Act, so no one could ever file an FOIA against it again. So what is the point here? The point is that if Tim Russert feels that a sighting that Dennis Kucinich had while living at Shirley MacLaine's house for a year on a sabbatical in 1982. A significant sighting is worth a question during a presidential candidate debate in Philadelphia on October 30th. Is not the fact that a leading candidate for president, I don't think Dennis Kucinich was a leading candidate, or vice president, has had a significant connection to this issue through a close friend, Laurance Rockefeller, who she had visited his ranch along with her husband in 1995. We have the records of that as well as photos of them meeting. Who had made a 3-year effort to convince her husband to be the disclosure president, and information regarding this phenomena was generated and provided to him in his office. That is not worth a question at the presidential debate. That is why several hundred, probably as many as 1,000 copies of this press conference will be duplicated, hopefully within a week, and they will be distributed to every significant Washington news outlet that we can get it to, and a lot of the national outlets as well, so that this point will get across. Other questions? Yes, sir. I mean,
okay.
Betty.
I would like to have you address how disclosure of the extraterrestrial presence on Earth can make all of our lives better and perhaps engender universal peace on Earth and benefit the Earth. How can that help?
I understand. We all want universal peace. Who knows when it'll happen? But from a purely policy and from a very nuts and bolts standpoint, all right, for all of those out there who simply are leading their basic lives, daily lives, and don't have time for this issue, but if you want to ask them for a few minutes, would like to know just exactly what is it in for me, the answer is short and straightforward. Though not everyone is on the same page on this. There are some people who are still not sure about this point. I am, so I will state it. Namely, that it is an extremely high confidence level, near certainty in my mind, that the government for 60 years has had alien technology from craft that have either crashed or been shot down. There's been ample evidence for this, and that technology has been placed in research facilities out in the West, almost certainly in underground labs, where they have been working on it for years, and there's evidence that they have had significant success in duplicating that technology, even creating craft that fly in anaerobic fashion, right? There are two technologies here that we care about. The propulsion system that allows them to operate the way they do, non-inertial right turns at 4,000 miles an hour, and the energy, the engine that drives them, right, which we can assume is slightly more efficient than a V8, all right? In a world faced with, and you've been hearing in the news just in the last few weeks, potential wars over food, wars over water, ozone holes, melting ice caps, melting tundra, a rise of terrorism stemming from the inequities that are increasing every single day, transformative technology that would completely alter the equation that's being sequestered in laboratories simply because they're not ready yet to divulge information to you. You have to decide, is that something you want to address, right? So let's just say that bringing forward technology would allow us to feed and provide proper basic services to everyone on this planet. I think is a fair case to be made that would reduce substantially the roles of the terrorist organizations and other disaffected groups that are going to continue to cause trouble until they feel they have a fair share. Yes, sir.
Do you feel there's anybody that's well known that's advising Hillary Clinton that's in the know about UFOs?
Let me tell you a story. Actually, I'm going to have someone else come up and tell a story. Robert, are you comfortable with discussing the events of Los Angeles?
Well, his question wouldn't address this area.
Scott Jones might be addressing.
Scott?
No, I don't have a direct answer to that.
Do you mind if I, from my point of view, I think I could make it connect. Do you mind if I connect it?
No.
Because I know that there's some proprietary. Okay,
yeah,
look,
stage, no.
Let's just say that I'm absolutely positive that Senator Clinton is aware of the efforts to bring this issue. All right, let me get down to the nuts and bolts. Look, this is really simple. This is an extraordinary situation. For the first time ever since 1947, a major political figure is absolutely pinned between her ambition to be the next president, or whatever ambition might be, and this issue, and there is no way out. Period. None. All right? We have the documents confirming the entire Rockefeller initiative. It's a certainty. We have the documents and the reports confirming her visits to Rockefeller and her husband visits to Rockefeller. We have FOIAs in for many, many, many more documents. We have a number of individuals involved in the Rockefeller initiative that are quite alive and kicking and able to discuss it at great length. She is connected to this issue. There is nothing that she can do about it. And it's only a matter of time until some esteemed member of the news media decides that it's worth knowing what she thinks about the presence of extraterrestrials, or the fact that half of the American people, when they are polled, say that they think that extraterrestrials are here. That would be half of the American electorate whose vote she wants. That question is coming, and she knows it's coming. And in fact, she may have thought it was going to come that October 30th evening, but what happened was the question was given to Kucinich, and it was very much at the end of the debate, which I understand why Tim Russert did that. And there was a little bit of time, and he tossed it to Barack Obama, passed over Hillary. Barack knew that question was coming, had a very good response that would push it aside, and Hillary dodged that question. However, there are many debates to come, and so this is not over. I have put the word out that I'm more than happy to discuss with her or her representatives privately this issue and possibly have some sort of meeting of the minds to mitigate the situation. I'm not trying to punish her. I'm not trying to destroy her. I'm simply asking her to do what is appropriate for someone who aspires to be the leader of the nation. But this is not over. Very shortly, PRG is going to publish an open letter to Senator Clinton on this. It will be published in a number of internet magazines. It will be sent out to 10,000 news outlets. It will be up on the internet, and I will be discussing it on pretty substantial radio programs. So the message here is, look, there's a lot of complicated, important things going on in the world. And if you want to be the leader of a nation, you have to address them all, not just those that are comfortable enough and won't lose you votes. And that's true of her, Mr. Obama. It's true of Senator McCain and everyone else that's running. And ask yourself, how many candidates in your lifetime have you seen speak to an issue that is global and worldwide and massively substantiated? How many times you've heard a candidate even utter the word UFO? This is a kind of disconnect to reality. It's a violation of natural law. It's simply unacceptable. And any nations that go there in history are destroyed. When you separate yourself from reality as a state, based upon whatever propaganda you want to buy into or whatever ideology is put forward, if it's disconnected from reality, in due course, your state will be a pile of rocks. More questions, please. We're not being thrown out. Yes, Antonio Huneas, a very important international researcher.
Anybody in the panel who may want to address this alleged meeting that took place at the United Nations in February? I know it's a controversial issue, but...
Yeah. Is there someone I can address it, or is there someone else has it? This is going around the internet. I have been contacted by somebody that says their meeting did take place, but it took place in Vienna. There's a lot of confusion here. We're trying to sort it out. It could be disinformation, but it's not inappropriate that the UN might do this, but we're trying to get to the bottom of it. If we get more, we'll obviously put out a press release. Any other questions? All right. All right, folks.
Can I add to this question?
Then you need to step here.
This is just a brief in relation to someone asked related to Hillary Clinton. Bill Clinton has been very open on this subject since he left the presidency. He has addressed it on 2 major occasions, didn't evade the question. In fact, one time the question had nothing to do with UFOs. In 2005 in Hong Kong, Bill Clinton openly stated that he had tried to look into the Roswell and the Area 51 mystery, and that he was unable to get anything, and then he stated very dramatically, I'm probably not the first president they kept in the dark, or that bureaucrats tried to wait out. About 2 months ago on a radio show out of Nashville, while campaigning for Hillary Clinton, he again stated that the Roswell was a very important issue, that he tried to go after it, he got the documents, he read all the documents. Bill Clinton does not avoid this issue. He'll openly admit he's very interested in this issue. And so he might be another person to approach and get more details on what Hillary's role and his role were in the Rockefeller Initiative.
Before we close, I would add that John Podesta, very quickly.
Okay, I'd just like to ask about the National Security Act of 1947 and how much that plays into it.
Absolutely seminal in terms of building the security structures that allowed them to prosecute the Cold War while simultaneously addressing the UFO ET issue within a secure environment without getting the information out. It's absolutely critical. There were two things happening in that century. The Soviet Union and our contestation with them, and the extraterrestrial issue that had to be dealt with under the national security structures. I also want to mention that John Podesta, major player in the Democratic Party and the head of the Center for American Progress, in 2002-2003 here, I think in actually one of these rooms, came out and basically called for the release of all UFO-related government documents. And Bill Richardson essentially asked for the same thing in the foreword to the Roswell Big Diaries in 2004. I believe that was a preliminary thing. It's very possible the Democrats already have plans to disclose in the spring of 2009, should they win the election. I would invite any reporter to ask them about that. Okay? It is my view, as someone who is an expert in this field and has been pursuing it in Washington as a registered lobbyist and an activist for 13 years, that something is going on within the thinking, analysis, and strategic part of the Democratic Party, where they're thinking to move this issue finally out in spring, and basically take one of the great political legacies of all time. I could be wrong. Ask them, right? Let's see what happens. Folks, so thank you so much for coming. We have people that have to get to the airport. We are done. Thank you. Good night. All right.